Record. All right, welcome everyone. My hope is that this will be the final version of our open forums on academic program review. I feel like I made some good progress and decisions about what to do on extensions and alterations, and I've shared the most recent file with you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can talk through everything. And since we're, a little bit lower on the attendance today, I expect a lot of folks are going to be watching this on webinar, but it also means that y'all who are here in the call are going to have to make sure to ask all the questions that you can think of and make sure we get all the information correct and up to date in our policy. All right, can you all see my screen? Yes. Okay, I'll make this a little bigger. All right, so as before, I'm working in the Word documents. This is very similar to what y'all have seen up to this point. I just dropped a version of it in the chat. And I'll ask Stephanie, if you don't mind, if somebody new joins, if you would reshare the document in the chat for them, because it's hard for me to do that while sharing my screen. Most of what is here, again, appears in blue. That is because we've made lots of additions. Anything in red with cross through is what was here before, and we are taking some of it out. Anything in black is what we've retained, and the goal is to give a totally new rule because there was so much missing from this rule and it was disorganized. I've also highlighted some things in yellow, and those again are for us to, specially talk through. So what we talked through last time, some of this method of delivery and distance education, face-to-face, we feel pretty confident about, so I took the yellow off. We do have a lot to discuss on the 4-credit non-degree certificate side, but we'll keep going till we get there. Up here in program status, I added a few more things, and I wanted to talk through this with you all. My original intention had been to kind of keep some of the program status stuff in its own policy. Because right now the section of the rule that's just after this one, which is 300-2107, deals with reinstatement of inactive programs, and we were going to change that. And ultimately, I came around to thinking that we can just talk about program status in this policy as some way of changing the program inventory. And so I wanted to get your input on these definitions and also whether that's a good decision. So program status, this is how we had said it last time, an indication of whether the program is actively enrolling new students. Now, the new part is that I actually spelled out what the 4 options for program status are. So number 1, these are in alpha order, but they're also in frequency order, frankly, within our inventory. So active status, most programs are active status, indicates that they are enrolling new students. We've had a few questions from institutions who say, our program is approved, but we're not enrolling students yet. Please don't show our program as active. And active is just the status that all programs have when they are ready to enroll. If you all wanted to introduce a status that says something like implementing or approved before it becomes active, we could consider doing that, but that would add a step of changing those approved or implementing programs to active once they're enrolling students. So that creates an extra layer of paperwork, which frankly the commission had done in the past. I really found that, it's hard to keep track of when exactly programs are implemented, and so we didn't want to go through that. But if you all feel really strongly that you want a status for it's been approved, but it's not enrolling, then we can consider that. All right, the second status, and this one is important to spend a little time on, is deleted status. Deleted does not mean the program is not in the inventory. Deleted programs are in the inventory, but they are not enrolling new students. And marking a program for deletion means that the institution intends to terminate the program. And we allow teach out just like SACS does. AIC system is set up for a 10-year teach out. This means when you're submitting your completions for iPads, those come into AIC system, and the delete programs marked as deleted will receive completers for 10 years. So do know that deleted programs are not purged, as in removed from the inventory. So you'll see using this language throughout, marked as deleted within the inventory. So they're not deleted from, they're deleted within. All right, inactive status, and we do get some confusion between inactive and deleted for reasons that probably make sense. So inactive was much more common in the past, as far as I can tell. This is not particularly common status right now, but the idea is that you have a program that you want to pause for whatever reason. Perhaps it is that you lost a key faculty member, or that your specialized accreditor requested a hold so that you need to do something for the program can be reactivated. And so the inactive status presses that pause button, and that means that the program can be reinstated to active within 5 years. So once it's on inactive, it can still be, students who are already there can be taught out, but the program will not enroll new students. So it's similar to deleted status, except that the intent is really to reactivate the program in the future. So we do discourage institutions from using inactive status if they intend to terminate the program. All right, the last
Dr.
one.
Dr.
Yeah.
McGill, quick question.
Ahead,
Just for my education on this, if a program goes into the deleted status, do they have to resubmit or redo the process to bring that program back? Say something changed. They said, we're not going to do this program anymore. They put it into deleted status. 3 years go by, they're teaching students out. And then in that time frame, they've gotten a lot of requests about that program, enough to justify reactivating it. Would they, if it's already in deleted status, so they then have to go back through getting it reapproved through AIC to bring that program back?
Yes.
Okay.
The other option, which we could potentially consider, would be doing a substantive modification. I didn't put this under substantive modification, but we can kind of brainstorm and think about this. Because once it's deleted, we would assume that there was a reason for deleting the program. Usually
Right.
institutions are loath to terminate programs that are in demand or the graduates are doing very well. So we would expect in that scenario, there would be a reason for the institution to modify the program or to propose a new program that meets whatever need that the previous version did not address.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we'll go down to the substantive things, and if you'll think that that's a good idea, we can talk about it. But like I said, there's usually a reason to terminate a program. All right, moved status. Now, this is something you can see here is assigned by AIC staff for archival reasons. So those of you who have responsibilities in institutional research know that when AIC collects completers from iPads, or the iPads files are sent to AIC for our student database, there's a verification process, and the program inventory is used in part of that process. And there needs to be a program in the inventory that corresponds to each student's completion. So when a program changes zip code or level, which is not particularly common, but it can happen, especially with doctoral programs that might move from an 18 to a 17 or so forth. We need to have that old program in moved status to account for those old completers. So it's not really something y'all deal with. There might be a handful of scenarios where institution are completing students in the old program through a teach out. And we do encourage you all to put the old students in the new program, but sometimes that's not possible, especially with the doctoral program. And so we do allow teach outs for moved programs. All right, so y'all have questions on that? Okay. All right, we talked about title and educator certification, reasonable last time. So we did talk through all this last time, but let me kind of just show you some changes that we've made. So we're looking right now at reasonable extensions of degree programs. Oh, I added a little bit in here about changes to degrees requiring approval because we filled out the section on 4-credit non-degree certificates below, and I wanted the sections to have headings that were distinct. So that's just really, just for clarity's sake. All right, we did make the update based on the last conversation. So it was originally consolidated, must have 2/3. We changed it to 50% based on the recommendation for consistency. Separating a program, we made a few cleanup things just to make it easier to understand what this meant. Okay, so splitting a program may result in one or more new entries. And there are options here, which is if you want to separate a program, you could put forward a new program proposal. But if you want to go with this route, you don't have to do post-implementation conditions, but you have to meet these criteria. Now, to get back to the question that was just raised about changing the status of deleted programs, I would consider that something on the level with this program approval. So, meaning that, okay, it's obviously not a brand new program, but there was a reason it was terminated. And if you want to modify it so that it's going to be reinstated as active, maybe it doesn't make sense to do a full new program proposal, but instead something that's more akin to this separating or merging a program or curricular changes, which would allow the program to make some changes to remain viable. But I do think we would want that viability there, because again, anything that's doing substantive modification would need to be viable. Otherwise, we want to check that it's producing enough graduates to be, to meet its criteria. So I got a thumbs up from Jarrett. So Jarrett, does that mean you think that that's a good idea to add that to this list of substantive modifications?
I think that, pardon me, move my mic. I do think that in what was going through my mind, that would make the most sense. If we terminated a program, like you said, there should have been a good reason for doing it. And if we're bringing it back, you probably have to change it in some way to make sense as to why I'm bringing it back. And if I'm not redoing an entirely new program, then that would at least give us an avenue to do that, if needed. Otherwise we'd need to go through the entire process again because we may be wanting to name the program the same, but it could be a completely different curriculum, setup, everything is what I'm thinking.
Right, and if it's a completely different curriculum, that would fall under curricular
Exactly.
changes over 50%.
Right.
And this one, so just status, not really other changes. I was gonna write only available to programs meeting liability standard.
And Robin, there be a time limit before from deleted to active?
That's a good idea. So inactive
Yeah.
sickness is 5 years, so I might be tempted to just go with 5 years.
I think that would sound reasonable.
Okay. So just to make sure we're all on the same page here. So if a program, the institution intends to terminate it, so they ask through an information item for the program to be marked as deleted. Then for some unforeseen reason, they decide they want the program to be active again, with some changes or other modifications that recognize the deficiency that caused them to want to terminate it, then they could bring that back through this substantive modification. We would still have to vote on it, but you wouldn't have to go through the full new program proposal, so long as the program was already producing graduates. But if you knew you could foresee that this program might need to be restarted, then you would put it on inactive status, and then you could change it back to active just through an information item. Okay, y'all are with me? Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna make, that's just some language that will be a placeholder for me. And I will insert a comment with policy language, but it'll basically say those things.
Mhm.
Natalie, did you want to chime in? I saw you come off mute.
No, I was just saying to what you just said.
Okay, good. I like it when there's a sense. All right. All right, so now we are moving into a different section. So I don't think I have my if I can remember my PowerPoint here. So y'all have seen some of this before, but I made a few changes to my diagram. So what we just saw was this section, substantive requiring approval for degrees. Program length change, and then I'm gonna add deleted to active status. All right, so that's what we're doing. So now we're about to move into this section. So we're still talking about degrees and these requiring notification. All right, so changes with notification. Okay, addition of options. And most of this language around options is from the original policy. And then we've got second kind changes to program inventory, which are nomenclature, program titles, and SIP. All right, program status. I filled this out a little bit, like I said, to correspond to those definition sections. So changes in status, including placing programs on inactive or deleted. So this is from the old policy. Viable programs can be placed on inactive status. A program that's on inactive can be reinstated only within 5 years, after which time it'll be marked as deleted. And deleted status, obviously, you don't intend to move it back. And we just talked about setting up that approval process to do that if we needed to. All right, changes to curriculum. I think we did talk about that last time. I did want to just highlight this section. We discussed in the last meeting, institutions are responsible for determining the percentage change and submitting the documentation. So you all are already making this determination for SACS, and so we trust your ability to do that for us. It changes to method of delivery. I think that's the same. All right, so now we're on to our third section. Just to remind ourselves, non-substantive changes that don't need to come to us. All right, so curriculum changes under 25%. This one changes to existing options. So I think we talked last time pretty at length about options and the need for AIC to review options at the time that they're added to make sure that there's enough overlap with the existing degree that the option really does make sense as part of that degree. But we don't want to be the options police, and we have found it very challenging to try and keep a running list of options, frankly, because it changes and there's so many programs that already exist that have options, like adding them all the way back is just going to be death by 1,000 cuts, I think. So we are thinking that we want changes to existing options to not need notification. So once that option has been reviewed the first time, changes to the title or minor changes to the curriculum don't need to come to us, except in these two cases. So the first one being if it affects more than 25%, then that trips off that notification need that's up there in the substantive changes needing notification. The other one is if an institution wants to assign a CIP code to an option as apart from the rest of the degree, that really is creating or separating the program. And so that goes off into that substantive change to separate the program. Otherwise, options will all have the same CIP code with the existing program. Right, most changes to delivery. So anything that isn't 100% of the program, then we don't need to know about it. All right, so we did spend some time on this last time, and I want to thank Ginger and her team from UA for sending me their document. And what we discovered was that SAC-CFC does have a name for this. When a single institution is trying to more efficiently deliver multiple degree programs, it is called a combination degree. And so this section with the comment, I've adapted the definition from the SAC-CFC resource manual if anyone wants to look at it. So a combination degree when a single institution creates an overlapping course of study that results in awarding more than one degree. This is non-substantive so long as the programs are already listed in the program inventory. So if you're trying to combine, two majors into a dual major, as long as both of the major programs exist, or an accelerated bachelor's master's, if you're trying to make it more efficient by some degree of double counting. We trust that you all are keeping track and have policies for academic integrity, and so we don't need to have a notification about those arrangements. All right, what do y'all think of this definition? Is it clearer? No, I don't see any objections. I assume y'all would pipe in if there were. All right, dual degrees. So this one is also something that SACS discusses. So this is students study at 2 institutions rather than 1, and the student completes courses of study at each and gets separate program credentials at each. And so we would consider that something that doesn't need, it's non-substantive, we don't need to know about it as long as the constituent degree programs are already in the inventory. Now, you may ask, what about if our program is going to be with a non-Alabama institution? As long as your piece of the dual degree is in the inventory, you should be all good. All right. Addition or modification of academic minors. Okay, this has always been something that AIC has not gotten into, which is when you create a minor course of study, a kind of smaller subsection of the major, Some majors do require students to complete a minor. The minors are not listed separately in our inventory, and we don't really need to keep track of your business when it comes to academic minors. All right, all with me so far. One thing I realized that I'm probably skipped across was joint degrees. I'm trying to figure out where I put it. I think yeah, the reason we skipped it is because we went down to adding this number 7, and I didn't spend any time on talking about what we decided about joint degree programs. Okay, so this is part of the conversation around combination, dual degrees. So joint degrees, separate from those, are where 2 institutions come together and give a single credential that has both of their insignias on it. And from the old policy, this was treated as unique and distinguishable from any program offered independently by one of the institutions. And typically, this is not particularly common, but these are listed separately in the inventory, and each institution that participates in the joint program gets its own entry with a program that is marked as joint. So I'm trying to remember one off the top of my head. I feel like there was a PhD in education between UA and UAB that was recently decided to end the joint program, but each institution had its program reflected in the inventory as being part of the joint program. So because it is very tricky to define what a joint program is, and if it's modifying something that's already in the inventory and kind of extending it, then we recommend that you all consult with AIC to decide whether both institutions' joint programs need approval, or if it's one institution. In that case, with the UA, UAB, if I'm remembering correctly, the UA program already existed and UAB participated as a joint program. And so there was only one addition that was needed to the inventory. So that, really they are unique situations. So we're putting it under something that needs approval, but frankly, before we even get to that part, we need to kind of talk through with you all how that's going to work on our end. Okay, do y'all have any concerns, or you feel comfortable with the way this is written? Okay. Thanks, Jared. I appreciate the thumbs up. All right, so now let's go forward and I'll show you. So we're done with these degree parts. And I want to talk about changes to 4-credit non-degree certificates. And this time we only have 2 sections. Certificates have always been able to be added through notification and not through approval. And that is what our policy shows us here. Go back to it. All right, so sorry for the scrolling. We're going to skip ahead because we went through all this stuff. Dual degrees, minors. Okay. We talked about educator certification last time. All right, so here's our reasonable extensions and alterations of 4-credit non-degree certificates. Okay, the text that you see with the yellow highlighting has been developed and added since the last time that we met. All right, so we're just again, saying the reason why we're even monitoring this has to do with considering these certificates, extensions, and alterations. And the first type is substantive, requiring notification. These are going to be information items. And top of the list is the addition of the 4-credit non-degree certificates. We do need to make sure that these are listed in the inventory. That has to do with completions processing. So one thing you'll see from the old policy that I've crossed out here is that there was a note, these certificates are not listed in the program inventory. In fact, they used to be listed in a separate inventory that was sometimes an Excel file. That became very problematic when we needed to verify completion. So this is a change from how the policy was written before, but it is not a change in practice as far as AIC has been proceeding over the past few years. So certificates are now in the inventory. That helps us keep track of them and verify for completions. Right, we do sometimes get a request from institutions that say, oh, you know, we spooled up this program, we really need to advertise it so we can get students into the program, but it's not going to be on the meeting until December, but we need students in January. Can we advertise? So we put this provision in here that say institutions may advertise once it's received, but not delivering the program. All right. So down a little bit further, so these are changes again that require notification for certificates. CIP code, that's to help us keep track of what, what programs you have in your inventory. Same with IPEDS level. I don't expect this to be particularly common to do. And certainly I wouldn't expect an institution to change a certificate across level from undergraduate to graduate or vice versa. What we really be talking about is reclassifying from IPEDS 1A, the mini, to a 1B short term, or potentially from a graduate certificate, post-baccalaureate to a postmaster's, or vice versa. All right, changes in program status. So this would be placing a certificate on inactive or deleted status. There is a description in this other policy, but I may actually just take that out because I don't think we're really going to have, I don't think we really actually need to revise that policy. We're just going to let it lie, but I don't think we need to refer to it either. But now we've got definitions for inactive and deleted status. So that should take care of it. Changes to method of delivery. This is basically exactly the same language as we saw for degree programs, that if the certificate becomes 100% online, or perhaps common for this, 100% competency based, then we would want to know about that. But otherwise, a few courses here and there, as you'll see below, we consider that non-substantive. All right, so moving into the non-substantive changes to 4-credit non-degree certificates. How's that a mouthful, but I think we're, trying to be specific and also make it clear that this section applies to just the certificates, and degrees have some slightly different considerations. Okay, so with the certificates, any changes to courses and requirements. So updates, as long as content and objectives are consistent, then we don't need notification about certificates. Compared with degrees where, you're keeping track of the percentage in line with SACs and so forth. Changes to certificate title, and this is kind of similar in vein to what we decided about the options, where certificates are intended to be very market driven, and we want to allow there to be some changes to the title without having to tell us and get prior notification, as long as the new title still describes the content of the program. So if you're changing the title in a way that makes it drift farther away from the CIP code or from the title that was originally approved, we trust you all to determine when that's occurring. And to ask us about it. But if it's just, you know, modifying something from, say, certificate in marketing to certificate in professional sales or something like that, those are reasonably aligned descriptions of content. So we trust you. And then again, like I mentioned earlier, most changes to method of delivery. So if it's less than 100%, we will consider it changes to courses or groups of courses, and we don't want to know about it. All right, what questions do y'all have?
None so far.
No questions, objections, anybody? Let's see what we've got. Okay, Ginger, thank you for your help. All right, well, let me show you a couple more things that are in here. So these are sections. I wanted us to keep track of what used to be in the policy that I am proposing taking out. So in this section before was some discussion of nomenclature change for community and technical colleges. So I believe this section was reflecting some accreditation updates that happened probably about 8 to 10 years ago now, when some of the technical colleges were expanding their mission to become community colleges, and there were changes between AAT and AAS programs. And so there were, you know, nomenclature from diploma to certificate or moving into AAT. And I'm given the very specific nature of this and the way that the Alabama community college system has evolved since this policy had been written into AICS rules, it's my recommendation that we take this out and delegate some of these nomenclature changes and accreditation shifts to ACCS to deal with using their own policies, which I imagine is already taking place, and that this is frankly hasn't been used since I've been here. Tell us, Natalie, what do you think?
Well, we do still have some AATs on the books, but remember, we right now have 2 colleges that are technical colleges. So one of them will more than likely stay that way. Reed, of course, is going through the SAT-COC process at this point, if I'm not mistaken. So I agree with you then that we are in the process of still working through some of that, and we can, you know, deal with it on our side.
And I don't see that AIC necessarily needs to, you know,
Be involved
insert
in it.
itself in the process of the conversion of AAT
Right.
and AAS and so forth.
Okay. Yes, I agree.
And like I said, I think the reason that AIC was involved was because either ACCS was very new or hadn't yet been established when this was written.
Right. And although I wasn't here, based on, you know, reading and then drawing conclusions from what I've read, you know, there was a time when we had a lot more colleges than we have now.
Yes.
And about half of them were technical and half were community. So I think that that was why AIC probably was involved at that point.
Mhm. Okay, and then related, and you know, again, it's a little bit hard to piece through why exactly this was so specific, having to do with the accreditation or candidacy status and which kinds of programs that a candidate institution could bring forward. Again, same reason, want to recognize the authority of ACCS to manage the accreditation and other awarding from their institutions.
Yes.
All right, so a couple of other things. So getting away from that, I don't think anybody has any objections saying, hey, please come in and intervene in our business here. We've got EdS degrees. So there was a provision in the current version on the books that said a new educational specialist degree could be provided through notification only if an institution could show that it had already been approved through the State Board of Education. These EdS programs lead to this Class AA teacher certification, and they kind of fall in between the master's level, which is an A, Class A certification, and then the doctoral level. And AIC, since I've been here, has been treating the EdS like a new degree. We haven't frankly had a lot of new ones popping up. But it is a degree program. And so we want the degree to go through the new proposal process, be subject to viability standards. And there's a separate process that the State Board of Education runs as far as whether something is, meets their requirements for the AA teacher certification. And you can see that this has been on the books since '84. And I think for our purposes, that was way before viability came into play, and we want to recognize the legislature's authority to request viability, in which education specialist is specifically called out with a viability standard. So we are recommending taking this one off the books. All right, don't have anybody saying, yeah, okay, Ginger agrees. If your deans of education are saying, no, we really just want our ed specialists with notification, then I suppose we can, discuss that, but seeing no like hair on fire, I'm gonna assume that we go forward. All right, there was also an extended discussion around criteria for determining reasonableness of a substantive extension or alteration. I believe that this would, if it were to move forward in any way, it would more appropriately be in a set of guidelines for developing, the substantive modification. I don't believe that this would need to be in the rules. I think the reason it was there was because in the past, AIC had done quite a bit more through approval. Many of the substantive changes that we would call notification were processed as approval. And there were only these two categories: substantive requiring approval and then non-substantive. This third category wasn't there. And so some of this section was intended to make it clear that AIC had some flexibility in determining what was considered substantive or non-substantive. And you can imagine having to go through approval for some of these kinds of changes. I believe this was one of Dr. Purcell's first amendments when he came in, was to get rid of those need for approval. But this is a relic of that. So we're recommending getting rid of it. If anybody really feels like you want to keep it, I do think the appropriate place for it would be in a accompanying set of guidelines rather than the rules themselves. All right. Lastly, there was this clause around mergers of research programs, specifically your master's thesis or dissertation options. I believe the idea here is that it gives some additional flexibility to research programs to merge, even if they come in under the threshold. I believe we decided it was 2/3. It had been 2/3 and we decided 50% of shared coursework. And the idea was that maybe research programs need a little more flexibility. We had tried to capture that by putting, I believe there was that statement that said, if a sufficient rationale is provided, the 50% requirement may be lowered, which should get to the same place. But there was an explicit call out for it in the previous policy. I think that this is not as clear as it could be. So my recommendation is that we take it out. Just to, make sure we're all on the same page, I'm gonna quickly scroll up and find that section where we talk about the core. Yeah, here it is. When we're talking about options, exceptions may be considered if an institution can present rationale. And if we're talking about merging programs, that's here. A consolidated program, the options must have a common set of courses, and then it refers to what we just read below, which is that, there can be less overlap if there's a rationale. Okay. All right, folks, what do you think? Do we feel pretty good about where this is at?
No, I think you need to start over from the whole beginning.
The whole beginning, we scrapped it and
Yeah, no,
we
I
did
think it
start
looks good.
from scratch, so.
Now, this is also coming from someone who is very much a novice in this area, so. But to me, it makes sense.
It makes sense. It was policy previously. I even had to go through and color code it the first time because it was like the Franken policy of changed and everything. So anyway, I'm glad y'all feel like it's in a better place.
And it's been great to be able to walk through these with you. And so certainly it is helping us as well as we try to get through some changes in our own policy. So we appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, well, we want to make it easier, as you all know. My goal has been, with your help, to make this more aligned with what you all are already having to do with your creditors. And I would love to get this through, maybe a few changes here and there. In which case then we can take that SAC substantive change policy and annotate it and say, okay, it's what SACS is, and here's what you have to do for AIC or not do for AIC. And that you will find that there's several things that you won't have to do anything for, that maybe SACS does require a little more from you. Now, in terms of process, so this one, I'll go make a few additional changes based on what we discussed today. If you all think of anything when you're talking with your stakeholders, send me an email as soon as you can so that I can consider it and try to get any changes that need to be made before I meet with our Academic Affairs Committee of the Commission on Higher Education. I like to keep them up to date on what we've been talking about in the open forums, and they're very pleased to see that there's so much input and participation that gives them more confidence to move forward with rule changes. And I'm going to try to meet with them before Thanksgiving, and that will allow them to feel confident about having this proposed rule change on the December meeting for preliminary approval. And as you all remember, preliminary approval means that it then starts the official process with Legislative Services Agency to become part of our administrative procedures. And so it gets posted to LSA's website. There is public comments period. we will continue to take feedback from stakeholders and from the public. I've been pleased that so far, with the policies we've brought through to date, the feedback has been very minimal, if any, because we've mostly answered the questions from stakeholders ahead of time through these open forums. And I'm glad you all have been so willing to give your time and help us craft things that are in all of our best interest. So we would bring this forward for preliminary approval, then it would start that public comment, and then it would, everything goes well, final approval in March. And it would become effective, I think it's, Stephanie, remind me, 45 days after that. So before the June meeting, it would become effective, and we'll start modifying some of our documents after the final approval is given. That would, like I said, involve giving some more guidelines that basically restate the policy, get posted to our website. We may need to edit or enhance some of the forms that we have for program or certificate submission or changes on our website. And so we want to, make sure we're ready to go once these things are effective. Right, do y'all have questions, comments? No, and so you have the file in the chats that we went through today. Like, you saw me making a few notations, and I'll put those in. And once the recording is all prepared, I will put it up on our webinar page with the version of the document so that you can share it with stakeholders, anybody who wants to watch, and send me any additional feedback. And we will, like I said, are hoping that everything is in good shape for us to get this on November's. You have to send things out in November for the December commission meeting, because Thanksgiving is going to be right upon us before we know. All right, everybody. Thank you again for your time and your input. I'll make sure you all know when the Academic Affairs Committee is meeting in case you want to witness it. It is a public meeting, but you certainly don't need to be a part of it if you don't want to. So, all right. And anybody who has additional questions, feel free to hang out and let me know.
Thank you, Robin.